The room buzzed with laughter and the soft glow of lights reflecting off champagne glasses, while mellow music mingled with the cheerful hum of voices. My birthday celebration was in full swing, but an uneasy feeling had crept in. Earlier in the evening, I'd noticed subtle signs, a lingering glance, a whispered conversation. As midnight approached, my suspicions intensified. But then I saw Olivia, my wife of 17 years, standing close to my brother Dean, her laughter seeming too familiar, her hand resting on his arm a touch too long. I watched, a prickling unease building, as they remained oblivious to my presence. Taking a steadying breath, I approached, clinging to the hope I was overthinking. Perhaps it was just the stress of long work hours and late nights. But as I neared, I caught Olivia's voice, soft and conspiratorial, her tone unmistakably intimate. "More than he ever could be," she murmured, a sly smile on her lips. Dean met her gaze with an intensity that twisted my stomach. "He doesn't know you like I do," he replied, his hand resting at the small of her back, too busy with work to see what's right in front of him. A chill ran through me, the room around me seeming to fall silent, leaving only their voices echoing in my head. "Olivia," I said, my tone low but steady. They both started, Olivia's face showing a flicker of surprise tinged with irritation. She quickly composed herself, her expression shifting to something colder, almost defiant. "Oh, George," she replied with a barely concealed smirk. "Didn't think you'd notice." "Notice what, Olivia?" I asked, keeping my tone calm despite the tension in my body. "That my wife seems to have forgotten she's married." She let out a short, mocking laugh. "Married," she echoed, her voice dripping with disdain. "To what, a ghost?" A paycheck. The air grew thick with tension as a few guests started to notice, sensing the change in atmosphere. Olivia didn't seem to care. She crossed her arms defiantly. "Dean has been more of a husband to me than you ever were," she spat. "A real man, not just a paycheck. Do you think providing is enough? It's been years, George. Years of me feeling like I'm married to a stranger." Dean looked uncomfortable but didn't avert his gaze, meeting mine with a look that bordered on defiance, as if he believed he had earned the right to be there beside my wife, as if he had taken my place. Anger surged within me, a fury I hadn't felt in years, but before I could respond, another voice cut in. It was Hazel, our teenage daughter, who had slipped beside her mother without a sound. She looked at me, her expression strangely confident. "Dad, don't bother asking questions," she said, almost amused. "Uncle Dean's been here more nights than you." My chest tightened, disbelief and anger mingling within me. "Hazel," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you even know what you're saying?" She rolled her eyes. "I know exactly what I'm saying, Dad. I see things. I'm not a kid anymore. Mom deserves someone who's actually around, not just someone who sends flowers and money." Her words hit harder than I could have anticipated, each one chipping away at the family I thought I had. How had things deteriorated so drastically without me realizing? Had I truly been so blind? Olivia placed a hand on Hazel's shoulder, a smug look on her face. "See, George," she said, "even your daughter sees it. I'm done pretending that this hollow marriage is enough. Dean is more of a partner than you ever were." My mind blanked. I wanted to yell, to throw them out, to demand answers. But a voice inside me held me back, reminding me that they weren't worth it, not here, not tonight. Slowly I nodded, forcing myself to stay composed even as my heart raced. "You think you know me, Olivia," I said, my voice soft but sharp. "You think this is who I am? Then you don't know me at all." With that, I turned and left the room, ignoring the stares and murmurs of the guests who had witnessed the ugly scene. I headed for the garage, each step strengthening a sense of resolve. I needed something, a reminder of who I really was. In the garage, I found an old, worn baseball bat, a gift from my late father. I hadn't touched it in years, but tonight it felt right. It wasn't for violence, but as a symbol, a memory of a time when I'd known exactly who I was. Gripping it tightly, I walked back into the living room, feeling its weight steady me. As I entered, all eyes turned toward me, faces filled with confusion, and in Olivia's case, fear. "George," she said, her voice wavering, "what are you doing?" I looked between her and Dean, my gaze icy and unwavering. "I'm done, Olivia," I said calmly. "Done playing the fool, done pretending this marriage is real. You think I'm just a paycheck? Fine. Keep your lover, keep your lies, keep it all. But understand this, your actions have consequences. She opened her mouth to speak, but I silenced her with a raised hand. I'm leaving, I said steadily, and you won't see a dime of my money. I'll make sure of that. I heard Hazel gasp, but didn't look at her. I didn't need to see her face to know she felt betrayed, perhaps even regretful. But it was too late for that. I was through being the man they could use and disregard. Turning to Dean, I stepped closer, letting the bat's weight serve as a silent reminder of the boundaries he'd crossed. You had everything, Dean, I said quietly. A brother, a family, and you threw it all away. For what? A few stolen moments. He said nothing, looking away, his face pale. Get out of my house, I ordered, my voice unyielding. Both of you. Pack your things and leave by morning. And don't come back. They stood frozen, shock and disbelief etched on their faces before Olivia finally moved, her expression a mix of anger and denial. Hazel clung to Olivia, casting a look at me filled with a mix of anger and sorrow, but I held her gaze, my resolve unshaken. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting a soft glow over the silent house. I sat at the table, hands clasped, staring down at the untouched coffee in front of me. I hadn't slept, my thoughts spiraling as I tried to process everything. Footsteps creaked down the stairs, and Olivia appeared, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed as though she'd been crying all night. She paused at the bottom, looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully decipher: shame, regret, fear, maybe all of it. But it didn't matter. George, she began, her voice a hoarse whisper. I didn't mean it, not the way it came out. She kept her eyes down, as if meeting my gaze was too much to bear. I let her words hang in the silence before I finally spoke, my tone cold. Oh, you didn't mean it, Olivia? Every word. She winced. No, I didn't. I was angry, George. I was hurt, and You were hurt, I interrupted, letting out a bitter laugh. You had Dean there to comfort you, didn't you? I shook my head. The man you discarded for this real man was nothing more than a paycheck to you. 17 years, Olivia. That's all I was. Someone, I repeated, my voice sharp. So you chose my brother, the one person who's been around our whole marriage? Tears streaked down her face as she burst out. I was lonely. I didn't think. And then it got complicated. Complicated, I shook my head, feeling bitterness harden in my chest. No, Olivia, it's very simple. You made your choice. Just then, footsteps sounded behind us, and Hazel appeared in the doorway. She hesitated, her eyes flickering between her mother and me, her shoulders tense. Hazel, I said, turning to her, my voice harsher than I intended. Were you in on this too? Her face flushed, and she looked away. It's not what you think, Dad. Then explain it to me, I demanded, my voice even but biting. You stood there last night taunting me, defending your mother's betrayal, as if I was the one at fault here. What do you have to say for yourself? She bit her lip, finally meeting my gaze. Look, I'm sorry, okay? But but you were hardly ever here, Dad. Uncle Dean he was around. He took care of us when you didn't. A knot twisted in my stomach. Took care of you, Hazel? I was working for us, for this family. Everything I did was to give you the life you have. She crossed her arms, looking down. I know but it didn't feel like you were really here. And that justifies you turning against me, against your own father. I took a deep breath, struggling to stay composed. Hazel, I need to know something. I need the truth. What do you mean? She asked, glancing nervously at her mother. I stared at Olivia, my heart pounding. Hazel, is she even mine? A heavy silence settled over the room. Olivia's face went pale, her eyes widening as she looked between me and Hazel, as though she'd hoped this question would never come up. Hazel froze, her gaze darting back and forth between us. George, Olivia began, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I want the truth, Olivia, I insisted, my tone leaving no room for argument. I want the truth right now. Olivia swallowed, looking down at her hands. It was complicated, she murmured, her voice weak. Complicated, my voice rose. How hard is it to tell me if I'm Hazel's father? Hazel looked between us, her face a mix of confusion and fear. Mom, what is he talking about? Olivia's shoulders sagged. I don't know. Okay, she finally admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know for sure. Hazel's face crumpled, and she took a step back, her eyes filling with tears. Wait, are you saying you don't even know who my father is? The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, the weight of the truth pressing down on all of us. I looked at Hazel, my voice barely audible. I loved you, Hazel. Whether you're mine or not, I raised you. I thought I was your father, but this changes everything. Olivia's face twisted, her hands wringing nervously. George, please, she's still your daughter. She loves you, you're her father, no matter what. I shook my head slowly. You're asking me to accept 17 years of lies, Olivia, 17 years of deceit. How am I supposed to just move past that? Hazel's voice shook. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know, I swear. I looked at her, my heart breaking. She was the girl I'd raised, the girl I'd loved as my own. But now, everything felt different, the betrayal gnawing at me, the life I thought I'd built revealed as a lie. I'll find out the truth, I said finally, my voice cold. I'll get a test, an if. It turns out that you're not mine. I couldn't finish, the pain too raw, too real. Hazel's face fell as she turned to Olivia, her expression one of anger and betrayal. How could you do this to us, Mum, she whispered. Olivia reached out, trying to touch her, but Hazel pulled back. I never meant for it to come to this, Olivia pleaded, her voice breaking. I was young, I was confused, and then George and I had you. I thought it didn't matter. I thought we could just be a family. A family, I repeated bitterly. This was never a family, not if you were lying to me from the start. Olivia's tears streamed down her face. George, please, can we just move on? Can we try to fix this? Oh, fix this, I let out a hollow laugh. There's nothing left to fix, Olivia. You, Dean, Hazel, all of you were part of this lie. Hazel turned to me, her face pale. Dad, I know this doesn't make up for what happened, but I am sorry. I didn't know. If I had known. It doesn't change anything, Hazel, I said, cutting her off. You chose your side. You made your choice. And now you have to live with it. The room fell silent. Olivia and Hazel stood there, looking broken, defeated. And as I looked at the people I once thought were my family, a strange sense of relief washed over me. I was free from the lies, free from the betrayal. In that moment I realized that I didn't need them. I didn't need any of them. Days slipped by in uneasy quiet, the house feeling cold and foreign. Olivia and Hazel avoided my gaze, and our meals were silent, devoid of the casual conversations and laughter that once filled them. We moved around each other like strangers, each of us wrapped in our own turmoil. Then, one evening, I found Olivia waiting in the dimly lit living room, wringing her hands nervously, her eyes red from fresh tears. I was about to walk past when she dropped to her knees, blocking my path. George, she began, her voice trembling. Please, please, just listen to me. She looked up, desperation etched across her face. I made a mistake. I was weak, but I need you to forgive me for us, for Hazel. I clenched my jaw, feeling anger flare up again. I wanted to look away, but her pleading eyes held me in place. Olivia, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, you didn't just make a mistake. You destroyed our family. You threw away everything we had for what? A thrill, some excitement with Dean? She reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled it back. My gaze was steely cold. I don't understand how you can even ask for forgiveness. More tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. I was lonely, George. You were always gone, always wrapped up in work. And I felt so unloved. I know it was wrong, but you were so distant. It was like you didn't even see me anymore. I crossed my arms, bitterness sharp in my chest. So your answer was to go to my brother? Did it even cross your mind to talk to me? Or was betrayal your first thought? She lowered her head, unable to look at me. I thought it didn't matter, that you'd understand. Understand, I couldn't contain the scorn in my voice. You didn't want me to understand, Olivia. You wanted a reason to do whatever you wanted, guilt-free. Her head dropped lower as she began to sob softly. "I love you, George. I know I've ruined everything, but I do love you. I didn't realize how much until now, when I see what I've lost." Her voice cracked, her breath unsteady. "Please, I'm begging you. Give us another chance." A quiet voice broke through the tension. Hazel stood in the doorway, pale and full of regret. She moved toward us, her steps hesitant. "Dad," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry too." I looked at her, feeling a strange blend of anger and sadness. Hazel had been part of it, standing by her mother, mocking me. But now she was here, her previous defiance gone. "You're sorry." My voice was rough. "Hazel, you took her side. You stood there, saw everything, and acted as if this were my fault." Her face fell, and she looked down, her eyes filling with tears. "I was stupid. I didn't understand. I thought I thought you didn't care about us anymore." I shook my head slowly, my tone cold. "Hazel, I gave everything to this family. Everything I did was for you, and when it mattered, you turned on me." Her voice broke as she whispered, "I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I see that now. Please don't hate me." Taking a deep breath, I felt the weight of their pleas pressing down, but inside there was only emptiness. "Hate you? No, Hazel, I don't hate you. But forgiveness? That's something you'll have to earn." Then the front door creaked, and there stood Dean, shifting uncomfortably, his face a mix of shame and fear. "George," he started, his voice shaky. I came here to apologize. I know what I did was unforgivable, but you need to know it wasn't. It wasn't planned. I didn't mean to ruin your life." "Didn't mean to ruin my life," I echoed, fresh anger rising in me. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Dean. You looked me in the eye at family dinners, laughed at my jokes, played the role of my brother while tearing my life apart." He swallowed hard, looking down. I was lost. Just like her. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh. "Lost? That's your excuse for sleeping with your brother's wife? You betrayed me, Dean. You betrayed everything we stood for as family. And now you're here, expecting forgiveness." He opened his mouth but fell silent, his shoulders slumping as he looked away, shame overtaking his face. "George," Olivia pleaded, desperation in her voice. "Can't we try to fix this?" I stared at her, replaying all she had put me through, the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. "Fix this?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Olivia, you're not asking for forgiveness, you're asking for control. You had everything and took it for granted. Now that it's gone, you want me to pretend it never happened." She clutched her chest, shaking her head. "No, George, I swear it's not that. I just want us to be a family again." "A family?" I shook my head, feeling my chest tighten. "This was never a family, Olivia. You and Dean made sure of that." Dean took a step forward, his voice trembling. "George, I know nothing I say can make this right. I can't undo what happened, but I don't want to lose you as a brother. Please if there's any way." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "We stopped being brothers the moment you crossed that line, Dean. There's nothing left for you here. You're dead to me." He looked down, his face falling, his hands hanging limply at his sides. For a moment it seemed he wanted to say more, but he only nodded, his shoulders sagging as he turned and walked out the door without another word. Silence filled the room, heavy and thick. Olivia remained on her knees, hands clenched, her eyes pleading. "George, please. I know I've hurt you. I know it will take time, but I'll do anything to make this right. I swear it." I looked down at her, feeling an odd sense of detachment. "Anything, Olivia. You had 17 years to do something to show you cared. 17 years to make this right. You made your choice, and now you'll have to live with it." Her face twisted with pain, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, George, don't throw everything away." "I'm not the one who threw it away, Olivia," I replied, my tone unyielding. "You did. Now there's nothing left for me here." She sobbed, her hands reaching out one last time, but I stepped back, leaving her kneeling there broken. Hazel stood by the door, her face streaked with tears. I looked at her, feeling the sting of the truth I'd uncovered about the daughter I'd loved as my own. Without a word, I turned and walked away, a strange sense of relief washing over me. The life I'd built was shattered, broken by betrayal, but somehow I felt lighter, I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing: I was free. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. After our lives unraveled, Olivia was left to pick up the pieces alone. I had made my choice to walk away, and I wasn't looking back. Reality hit her hard. She could no longer afford the house without my support, and her savings vanished faster than she could manage. She'd call every day, leaving messages that alternated between desperate apologies and bitter accusations, but I ignored them, refusing to feed her turmoil. One afternoon, Hazel showed up at my door, her expression guarded but uncertain. I let her in, and we sat in the quiet kitchen, the silence stretching. "Dad," she started, her voice barely a whisper, "I know I messed up." She looked down, fidgeting with her sleeve. I thought I knew everything. I didn't. I didn't know anything. She looked up, regret filling her eyes. I shouldn't have taken her side. I was wrong. I spoke gently. "Hazel, you're young. You didn't ask for any of this, and I won't pretend it doesn't hurt. But don't let her choices ruin your life." She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "I don't even know who I am anymore, Dad. Everything feels different." Her confession weighed heavily, her uncertainty raw. A part of me softened. "You're still my daughter," I said quietly. "Whatever happens, that doesn't change." In the months that followed, I kept my distance from Olivia and Dean, but the consequences of their actions began catching up with them. Olivia struggled to keep up with the mortgage, but the numbers weren't in her favor. One night she called me again, and despite my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was barely recognizable, a hollow echo of the confident, defiant woman I'd once known. "George... I need help," she murmured, her voice cracking. I can't do this alone." I remained silent, letting her continue, hoping she'd find something meaningful to say. "Dean... he's gone," she added in a barely audible tone. "He left when things got rough, said he needed time to think. I don't even know where he is." Her voice wavered, any attempt at composure slipping. "Please, George, I have nothing left. I made a mistake... Please understand." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Now you see it," she paused, taking an unsteady breath. "I didn't realize what I was losing. I was foolish... stupid." "Olivia," I interrupted, "this is the life you chose, you and Dean both. You thought I was just a paycheck. Now you're realizing I was a lot more than that." Her sobs grew louder, her voice breaking with each one. "I know... I'm sorry. I know it's too late, but please, can you help me? For everything we once had." I took a breath, weighing my words. "This isn't about what we had. That ended when you decided I wasn't enough. You'll have to move forward alone." I hung up, my resolve unshaken, feeling a strange sense of closure. Meanwhile, with Dean gone, Olivia faced harsh realities alone. Her social circle faded, and the people who once flocked to her parties were nowhere to be found. She reached out to my family, even some of our mutual friends, but sympathy was scarce. Word had spread, and no one was inclined to offer support. Caught in the middle, Hazel gradually distanced herself, often staying with friends. Eventually she reached out to me, wanting to spend more time together. I welcomed her openly. Our relationship was far from perfect, but we took it day by day. As her visits grew longer, the guarded look in her eyes softened, and together we started to rebuild. During this new chapter, I met Aurelia, a woman with a boundless kindness. We met in a local art class, and her laughter felt like a balm I hadn't realized I needed. We moved slowly, respectful of each other's pasts, but with her, trust felt natural. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen. One weekend, Hazel joined Aurelia and me for coffee. Conversation flowed easily, Hazel laughing and sharing stories that hinted at the girl she used to be. Aurelia had that effect. She drew people in with her warmth and sincerity. Afterward, Hazel pulled me aside, her voice tinged with a warmth that had been absent for so long. "I like her, Dad," she said. "She seems good for you." That small nod of approval felt like a bridge. We'd come so far from that dark night, and though scars remained, we were moving forward together. Meanwhile, Olivia faced the wreckage her choices had left behind. One evening, Hazel came over, and we sat on the porch as the sun cast long shadows. "Mom's struggling," she said quietly. "I don't think she's been eating much, and she rarely leaves the house." It's hard to see her like that." I nodded, understanding the weight Hazel carried. She's facing her consequences. "Hazel, I know it's painful, but these were her decisions." Hazel sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I know, but I can't help feeling sad for her, I guess." "Sadness doesn't mean you forgive her actions," I replied. "It just means you're compassionate. She's still your mother, and it's okay to feel that way. But don't let her mistakes define who you are. You can choose a different path." Hazel took my words to heart, and as the months passed, she began to focus on her studies, her interests, and our time together. The anger between us had faded, replaced by a quiet understanding that, though life had dealt us a painful hand, healing was still possible. Olivia's decline continued, her choices weighing heavily on her. One day she left a voicemail filled with apologies, but I chose not to respond. My focus was on the future, on my newfound happiness, and the people who mattered most. I realized that forgiveness wasn't something I owed her. It was a personal journey that didn't require her participation. I was moving forward without her, building a life free of the bitterness that once consumed me. As for Dean, he became a ghost, someone I no longer acknowledged. The brother I once knew was gone, replaced by a stranger. If he found happiness, it would be without me in his life. With Aurelia by my side and Hazel rediscovering herself, I found a peace that had once seemed unreachable. I no longer needed Olivia's apologies or Dean's explanations to feel whole. I had created my own closure, a life defined by honesty, respect, and a quiet joy. The scars of betrayal would remain, but they no longer held me back. I was free, and for the first time in years I was living life on my terms. Months had passed since I had severed ties with Olivia Dean and the life I'd once known. Walking through town with Aurelia by my side, I felt like a new man. The gentle breeze and the hum of life around me felt oddly comforting. We laughed about something small, a light-hearted joke, a shared glance, and for once, I felt the weight of the past lift entirely. Then, as we rounded a corner, I saw her Olivia standing across the street. She was alone, clutching her coat against the wind, her hair disheveled. Her gaze scanned the street, landing on me. The look she cast Aurelia held a mix of longing and bitterness, a look I barely recognized on the face of the woman I'd once shared my life with. She took a step forward, as though she might call my name, her mouth opening slightly, her hand lifting. I felt Aurelia's fingers tighten around mine, grounding me in the present. For a brief moment I considered turning back, hearing what Olivia might say, but something within me stayed firm. The man who had loved her, trusted her, and sacrificed everything, that man was gone. I looked into her face one final time, then turned away, walking down the street beside Aurelia. "Was that?" she asked gently, sensing the tension. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. "Yeah, it was." She gave me an understanding look, needing no further explanation. She already knew what I'd been through. For once I felt no need to dwell on it. My silence was closure enough. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Hazel. Despite everything, she had chosen to stay in touch, though it was rare. This time her message was straightforward. "Can we talk?" When we met, she appeared anxious, as if gathering the courage to say something significant. We settled into a small cafe, the comforting aroma of coffee surrounding us. Hazel fidgeted with her cup before finally looking up at me. "Dad, I know I've said it before, but I'm sorry," she began, her eyes reflecting a sincerity I hadn't seen before. "I'm sorry for the things I said that night, and for not trusting you when I should have. I thought I was helping Mom, but now I see I only made everything worse." I let her words sink in, the remorse softening the edges of my heart. "Hazel, I know you were in a tough spot," I replied gently. "I can't say it didn't hurt, but I understand you were caught in the middle. You didn't deserve any of this." She looked down, her fingers trembling slightly. I wish things were different, that I could go back and make it right." I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "What's done is done, but we can go forward. We can make things better from here," she nodded, a glimmer of hope lighting up her face. After our conversation, I walked her back to her mother's place. As we reached the house, Olivia sat on the front steps, looking worn and drained, as if her choices had finally weighed her down. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between anger and surrender. "Hazel," she called softly, and my daughter moved to her side. Olivia's eyes met mine, hollow and empty. Yet she said nothing. She just watched, as if hoping the silence would express what words could not. "Goodbye, Olivia," I said quietly, my voice steady. There was no bitterness left, only a quiet sense of finality. Her expression flickered, perhaps with a glimmer of regret, but I didn't stay to see. I turned and walked away, not looking back, feeling the emptiness behind me as I moved forward. The next morning I stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Aurelia was beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder as we watched the waves crash below, each one washing away the traces of the last. She looked at me, her gaze filled with compassion and understanding. "You did the right thing," she said softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. I nodded, realizing that for the first time in a long while I truly believed it.